There comes a point in life where your soul becomes exhausted. Not physically exhausted, not the kind of exhaustion that disappears after a good night of sleep, but emotionally exhausted. Exhausted from trying to hold together relationships that constantly fall apart. Exhausted from being the one who always understands while nobody understands you. Exhausted from carrying conversations, effort, loyalty, and emotional responsibility alone. And eventually you begin asking yourself a painful question. How long will I continue sacrificing my peace just to keep certain people in my life? That question changes everything, because many people spend years trying to save relationships that were already broken long ago. Not because they are weak, but because they are attached. Attached to memories, attached to promises, attached to old versions of people who no longer exist. And attachment can make people tolerate pain far longer than they should. Many people confuse attachment with love. They believe suffering proves loyalty. They believe endless sacrifice proves devotion. They believe staying no matter how badly they are treated means the relationship is special. But real love should not constantly destroy your peace. Healthy love may challenge you sometimes, but it should not leave you emotionally starving every single day. There is a difference between healthy struggle and emotional exhaustion. And deep down, most people already know the difference. They simply fear accepting it. Because acceptance means endings. Acceptance means uncertainty. Acceptance means letting go of what once felt familiar. And human beings naturally fear unfamiliarity. That is why people stay too long in relationships that drain them emotionally. They fear loneliness. They fear starting over. They fear being forgotten. They fear never finding connection again. So they keep holding on to people who constantly confuse them. Holding on to people who only love them conditionally. Holding on to people who return only when convenient. But eventually, exhaustion becomes louder than attachment. Eventually, your heart gets tired of begging for consistency. You get tired of trying to explain your worth to people who continuously overlook it. You get tired of shrinking yourself just to maintain temporary peace. And slowly, something inside you begins waking up. You begin realizing that relationships should not constantly feel like survival. You begin realizing that real connection should not require endless suffering. You begin realizing that love without respect eventually becomes emotional pain. One of the hardest lessons in life is accepting that some people only know how to love temporarily. They love you when life feels exciting. They love you when they feel lonely. They love you when they need comfort. But the moment relationships require maturity, accountability, patience, or emotional depth, they disappear emotionally. And if you keep chasing emotionally unavailable people, you will slowly lose yourself trying to earn stability from those who cannot provide it. That is why letting go becomes necessary sometimes. Not because you stopped loving them, but because loving them started hurting you more than healing you. Sometimes the hardest person to let go of is not who they are now. It is who they used to be, the version who made you feel safe, the version who made promises, the version who made you believe the connection would last forever. But people change, effort changes, priorities change, feelings change, and denying reality only prolongs suffering. Many people stay emotionally trapped because they keep hoping things will return to how they once were. They replay old memories. They reread old messages. They hold on to moments that no longer reflect reality. But healing begins when you stop living inside memories and start accepting the present. The present always tells the truth. The present reveals consistency. The present reveals effort. The present reveals emotional availability. And sometimes the truth hurts because it forces you to release illusions you desperately wanted to keep alive. There are relationships that survive only because one person keeps overextending themselves emotionally. One person keeps apologizing. One person keeps initiating conversations. One person keeps trying to fix every conflict alone. But relationships cannot survive long-term imbalance. Eventually, exhaustion appears. And when exhaustion appears, love slowly starts turning into emotional weight. You start overthinking constantly. You lose peace. You feel anxious instead of secure. You feel emotionally drained after interactions instead of emotionally fulfilled. That is not something you should ignore. Your emotional exhaustion is information. Your anxiety is information. Your constant confusion is information. Sometimes your body recognizes what your heart is still struggling to accept. Not every relationship is meant to continue forever. And that does not erase the value of the memories. Some people were meant to teach you lessons, not stay permanently. Some teach you boundaries. Some teach you discernment. Some teach you the importance of self-respect. Every connection changes you somehow. But growth requires knowing when to release what no longer aligns with your peace. Holding on to expired relationships creates emotional stagnation. You cannot fully heal while constantly reopening old wounds. And many people reopen wounds by revisiting people who repeatedly hurt them, not because they enjoy suffering, but because attachment is powerful. Sometimes people would rather stay in familiar pain than face unfamiliar freedom. But freedom is necessary for healing. You deserve relationships that bring emotional safety, not constant emotional confusion. You deserve consistency, not temporary affection. And the moment you stop chasing unavailable people, you begin reconnecting with yourself again. There are people who spend years trying to prove their worth to those who already decided not to value them. And that pursuit becomes exhausting. Because no amount of overgiving can force someone to appreciate what they continuously take for granted. You can love deeply and still be overlooked. You can stay loyal and still be betrayed. You can give your best effort and still not receive the same energy in return. That is why self-respect matters. Self-respect means recognizing when love is no longer healthy for your spirit. It means understanding that your value should not depend on someone else's ability to recognize it. Many people stay trapped in painful cycles because they confuse familiarity with destiny. Just because someone feels familiar does not mean they are meant to stay forever. Sometimes familiarity simply means repetition, and repetition can become addictive even when it hurts. People get attached to emotional highs and lows, the apologies, the temporary affection, the moments where things briefly improve. But temporary improvement is not lasting change. Real change requires consistency, and consistency reveals character. One of the saddest things in life is watching good people slowly lose themselves trying to hold on to relationships that no longer nourish them. They stop prioritizing their own happiness. They stop trusting intuition. They stop listening to themselves. And eventually they become emotionally disconnected from who they truly are. That is why letting go is sometimes an act of self-preservation. You are not giving up on love. You are giving up on suffering endlessly for people who refuse to meet you halfway. There is wisdom in accepting when your presence is no longer valued. Not because you are unworthy, but because forcing yourself into spaces where you are repeatedly neglected destroys inner peace. And peace matters more than forced connection. Some endings feel unfair because you invested so much emotionally. You gave time, energy, hope, effort, and walking away feels like losing all of that investment. But staying in unhealthy situations does not recover lost investment. It only creates more pain. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for people who stopped fighting for you long ago. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away even while your heart still cares. Because healing is not always immediate. There will be days when memories return strongly. Days when loneliness whispers lies into your mind. Days when you miss people who were never truly good for your peace. That is normal. Healing is rarely linear, but every time you choose self-respect over emotional desperation, you become stronger. Every time you stop chasing unavailable people, you rebuild confidence. Every time you choose peace over chaos, you reconnect with your worth. One of the most painful realities in life is realizing you cannot heal people by loving them harder. Many people stay in toxic relationships because they believe enough patience will eventually change someone. They believe enough sacrifice will inspire growth. But people only change when they genuinely want to change. You cannot force emotional maturity. You cannot force accountability. You cannot force honesty. And trying to save people who refuse to save themselves will emotionally drain you. That lesson breaks many hearts. Because love naturally makes people hopeful. Hopeful that things will improve. Hopeful that consistency will return. Hopeful that effort will become mutual again. But hope without reality can become dangerous. Because it keeps people emotionally attached to situations that continuously harm them. There are people who only return when they feel lonely. People who disappear when life becomes convenient for them. People who give temporary affection just enough to keep you emotionally attached. And many people confuse that inconsistency with love. But love should not constantly leave you questioning where you stand. Real connection creates clarity more than confusion. Healthy relationships create emotional safety. You should not constantly feel anxious about whether someone cares. You should not constantly feel like you are fighting for basic attention. And if someone repeatedly makes you feel emotionally invisible, believe the pattern. Patterns reveal truth more than promises. Words can temporarily comfort you, but consistent behavior reveals reality. Always pay attention to consistent behavior. One of the strongest things you can do is stop chasing people who repeatedly show you they do not value your presence. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with quiet acceptance. Acceptance is powerful, because acceptance allows healing to begin. The moment you stop forcing connections, your energy slowly returns. Your mind becomes quieter. Your emotions become lighter. Your confidence slowly rebuilds itself, and eventually you begin rediscovering who you were before constant emotional exhaustion consumed your spirit. You remember your dreams again. You remember your peace again. You remember your worth again. Sometimes letting go is not losing someone else. Sometimes letting go is finally finding yourself again. And that journey changes everything, because once you truly reconnect with yourself, you stop settling for relationships that constantly damage your emotional health. You stop accepting bare minimum effort. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop shrinking yourself for temporary connection. And slowly your standards rise, not from ego, but from healing. There is a version of you waiting on the other side of release, a calmer version, a wiser version, a stronger version. But you cannot meet that version of yourself while holding on to everything that keeps hurting you. Some people are attached to pain because pain feels familiar. Even unhealthy relationships can become comfortable after enough repetition. People become used to inconsistency, used to emotional confusion, used to disappointment, and eventually chaos starts feeling normal. But healing requires breaking those patterns. Healing requires honesty. You must honestly ask yourself, how long will you continue abandoning yourself just to avoid being abandoned by others? How long will you continue sacrificing your peace for people who continuously disturb it? How long will you continue shrinking yourself to fit inside relationships that no longer nourish your spirit? At some point, exhaustion becomes a teacher. It teaches you that constantly proving your worth to emotionally unavailable people is draining your life force. And slowly, you begin choosing yourself again, not selfishly, not arrogantly, but wisely. There is strength in walking away from what no longer respects your heart. There is strength in accepting that some relationships cannot be repaired no matter how deeply you care, because relationships require effort from both sides. And you deserve relationships where love flows naturally instead of feeling like constant emotional labor. Another important truth is this: not everyone who leaves is meant to return. Some endings are permanent. And while permanence can feel painful at first, it is sometimes necessary for growth. If certain people stayed forever, you might never discover your own strength. You might never build emotional independence. You might never learn self-worth outside of external validation. Loss can become redirection. Heartbreak can become awakening. And solitude can become healing. One day you will look back and realize certain endings protected your peace. At the time, you may have begged for those relationships to survive. But later you understand why they needed to fall apart. Life has a way of removing what no longer aligns with your growth, and your suffering increases when you keep rebuilding doors that life is trying to close. That is why peace often begins with surrender. Not surrendering your dreams, not surrendering your value, but surrendering the need to force every relationship to stay forever. Some people are chapters, not the entire story. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner healing begins. So let them go. Let go of the people who constantly confuse your heart. Let go of the people who only return when convenient. Let go of the people who drain your energy while giving little in return. And most importantly, let go of the version of yourself that believes you must suffer endlessly just to be loved. Because real love will never require you to lose your peace just to keep it alive.